So as the world grapples with the coronavirus, 18 top scientists have demanded a transparent, independent, data-driven and peer-reviewed study on the origins of the coronavirus. The scientists are increasingly now challenging the World Health Organization findings that it was extremely unlikely that the virus leaked from a Wuhan laboratory. Scientists insist that this is not an academic exercise, but this is essential to fight the pandemic and its future waves. Saikir and Kanan in Singapore brings you our top story tonight.
The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Matt, no, go up to your room, honey.
So we have a virus with
a fictional virus.
No vaccine at this time.
And a real universal pandemic, almost a decade later.
Watch this. It's transmission.
The fictional disease is a hybrid of influenza and Nipah that emerged in Malaysia in the late 1990s.
No.
As of last night, there were 32 cases.
But the origins of the real one are still shrouded in mystery. Earlier this year, the WHO's international team found no smoking gun or evidence of an accidental lab leak from its visit to Wuhan in China, the original epicenter of the new coronavirus. Its report drew criticism, and the WHO chief distanced himself from the findings. More than a dozen countries have since called for a deeper investigation to determine how the deadly virus infected humans. And now, 18 experts from the United States, the UK, Switzerland, and Canada have written a letter feeding theories that the new coronavirus might have escaped from a Chinese lab. Back in October, Pune-based researchers Monali Rahalkar and Rahul Bahulikar traced the possible origins of the COVID-19 virus to a mine in southwestern China's Yunnan province, where a mysterious pneumonia-like illness sickened workers in April 2012.
The first point is about how China may have already seen small outbreaks that were eerily closer to SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 as we call it today. This was way back in April 2012. The second point is about how this triggered a series of projects and researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which specifically focused on horseshoe bats and associated coronaviruses. The third point is about the structure and the nature of the virus, which points to a possibility of the virus having been modified in a lab, and the resultant outbreak could also have been because of an accidental lab leak.
Yunnan in China is a natural habitat of horseshoe bats, believed to be hosting the COVID virus. Researchers say it's impossible for them to fly 1,900 kilometers up to Wuhan. Many experts now believe there's a strong possibility that the Chinese labs had already been working on the samples seized from Yunnan.
When the outbreak started, the virus was completely adapted to human beings, and hence there is a possibility that the virus could be modified in the lab, or there could be a backbone which was used for the construction of the virus.
Further, microbiologists found startling similarities between the Yunnan illness and COVID-19.
Our story today focuses on 3 different sets of findings, shared exclusively to India today by eminent scientists and researchers from across the world who work for the biggest of institutions.
An eminent American microbiologist and biosafety expert, Richard Ebright, insists the Wuhan lab could have been involved in manipulating coronaviruses. Chances are that the bug that caused this pandemic is much older. Only a broader, independent investigation could firmly conclude. Was its spillover into the human population natural, man-made, or accidental? A report by Sai Kiran Kannan from Singapore for India Today.
And it's not just former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo who continues to insist that the Communist Party of China is hiding facts and that he believes the Wuhan lab needs to be investigated further. These voices are now growing and across the globe seeking facts and a transparent investigation. Joining me on India First, Dr. Monali Rahilkar, a microbiologist from the Agarkar Research Institute, someone who's been working on this for close to a decade, if not more, Professor Brahma Chilani and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, two of the most authoritative voices on China, and Sai Kiran Kannan, open source intelligence analyst from Singapore, who put this report together. And Sai Kiran, if I could come to you first, you spoke to the scientists who are now seeking a transparent and data-driven investigation into the Wuhan lab. Why the insistence on the Wuhan lab, Sai Kiran?
I'm sorry, why the insistence?
On the Wuhan lab.
Right. Yeah. So, yes. So, we just pointed out in the story. So, the story goes back to April 2012, when the miners in Wuhan were infected by a virus that is eerily closer to what we have today as SARS-CoV-2. So what happens is they get a lot of information, and they want to probe more, right? So this is also the time when Dr. Li Sheng, is also in charge of many of the research projects at WIV. That is the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, WIV is one of the most, advanced, lab centers in the world. So they have the capability to perform numerous projects, numerous researchers that are really advanced, and they have on paper at least, they have very high safety, safety equipment, in their lab. So after 2012, they start probing and they start researching on almost thousands of different coronaviruses, specifically on horseshoe bats, after this April 2012 incident. So we also have a lot of scientists that are quoted before the COVID outbreak, that on the amount of work that has been done in WIV. So what we've also done in our research and putting up the story is not just looking at the scientific angle, but we are also looking at other areas wherein which we picked up many open source intelligence-based information on numerous things that happened just a few months before the outbreak in December 2019. So we had a lot of safety safety checks being done at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We had one of the there were numerous tenders in terms of disposing of the biosafety bio waste materials from WIV and the lab surrounding. So there were a lot of information that also corroborates to maybe something that went wrong at WIV. Secondly, why?
Give me a moment as we try and reestablish our audio link with you, Sai Kiran. Dr. Rahilkar, you've been researching the origins of the virus for some time now, and in your view, is the demand of the 18 scientists for a data-driven, peer-reviewed and impartial investigation just an academic exercise? What do scientists hope to achieve, especially if we were to draw lessons from the 2012 Yunnan outbreak that Sai Kiran mentions that you've researched?
Hello, I'm audible, right?
Loud and clear.
So,
Okay. So we started researching in last year. I think today is exactly 1 year when we published a preprint on this particular connection of Yunnan mine shaft. There was a mine shaft where 6 miners went to clear the bad guano. And they got sick with a very similar COVID. It was a very similar disease to COVID-19. We studied the illness, and then what we found out was that the nearest relative of SARS coronavirus 2, that is RATG13, was also found from the same mine. And so that's why we pushed this forward and wrote a paper. It was peer-reviewed and published. Now, after all this, it was published in October 2020. After then we met a Twitter group, and it is called Drastic. So Drastic is working continuously on COVID origins. We are doing scientific research, and we are not into any type of politics,
Okay.
We are doing pure scientific research. And so the 18 scientists now, which we have demanded that whether it is a lab leak from Wuhan labs, I think that's a very valid hypothesis to be investigated according to me, because Wuhan had 3 different laboratories. And WIV was the most premium lab where most of these coronaviruses were researched, especially the SARS type. So,
Professor Chilani, China did not give access. Okay, China did not give access, Professor Chilani, even to the World Health Organization team. Mike Pompeo, as US Secretary of State, says he could not get details from China on the origins of the virus when American death toll was rising. Is there merit in Pompeo saying that China is hiding something, and that is why this investigation is extremely important?
First, Gaurav, let's look at the facts. The Wuhan Institute of Virology has acknowledged that its researchers were working on coronaviruses. They were seeking to make these coronaviruses more infectious and more dangerous for experimental purposes. It's also a known fact, admitted by the US government, that millions of US taxpayer dollars went to this Wuhan Institute of Virology for research on bad coronaviruses. So these are 2 admitted facts. Investigating the origins of the pandemic is critical for another reason. This is not the first deadly disease to spread globally from China.
Yes.
We all know about the 2002-2003 SARS outbreak. It was the first pandemic of the 21st century. It was gifted by China because the Chinese sought to cover up the SARS outbreak in China. But China has been the origin of several earlier epidemics. As Chinese scientists have acknowledged, China was the origin of the 1957 Asian flu, the 1968 Hong Kong flu, and the 1977 Russian flu. And according to new research, the 1918 Spanish flu, which killed some 50 million people worldwide, also originated in China. So understanding how COVID-19 originated is essential for designing international rapid response efforts to prevent a new epidemic originating in China.
Yes.
So getting to the bottom of how this virus arose is so critical to preventing a future pandemic.
Okay. Ambassador Sajjan Har, 18 scientists from prestigious universities and different countries across the globe, they want this open investigation. Now, given China's money power and muscle power, will this effort lead to any forward movement or end up being an exercise in futility? Because this is just seeking one part of the truth. The other more dangerous part is to know whether this was an accidental leak, whether this was a deliberate leak, whether this was a bioweapon. And I'll come to those aspects in just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely right, Gaurav. I think what we've seen from the beginning, in November, December, it started. Then the deception that China engaged in, the complicity and the pressure that it applied on WHO, and WHO sort of took on everything hook, line and sinker what China was feeding it, either whether during the month of January or even during the visit of DG WHO, Dr. Tedros. So they took on everything rather than having an independent investigation of what was going on. They took on board and they delayed declaration of the pandemic till the middle of March last year. So I think since that time, people have been demanding, you would recall, Australia started demanding an independent, scientific, transparent inquiry. And what did the world get as against that? You know, there was wolf warrior diplomacy, there was intimidation, whether it was military or political intimidation, or it was economic coercion. So, you know, everywhere, either in Europe or anywhere else, anyone wanted asked for an independent investigation. This is what China responded with. Obviously, China has something to hide. Last point that I'll make here is, you know, the investigations that have been done so far, that is this huge team that went to China, they were not given access to WIV, to the other places, and the report has just been whitewashed to China. The other one, that is the eminent persons group with Helen Clark and others who had gone there. Maybe there was some hope that they will have the courage and the integrity to call out China. That has also not been done. So I think it can be done only if the world stands together, united, strong, and pushes back against China.
And that's easier said than done. And Saikaran, the scientists you've been speaking to, do they have a roadmap? Is there a plan how they intend to move forward on this?
Well, in terms of plan, I think the more they ask questions to WHO and China, that is the only way forward. Because right now, like you said, there are a lot of factual and scientific basis for the questions being asked. In terms of the WHO team that visited China earlier this year, they came up with a report that was more than 100 pages, but you know they allocated just around 4 to 5 pages exactly. In terms of probing the possibility of an accidental lab leak. So that itself was very, very biased in terms of how they looked at the whole issue. They just wanted to whitewash this and wash it off the carpet, because there is some levels of resistance from them to even probe possible lab leak. So scientists that I spoke to, they're just looking at raising as many questions as possible on WHO, on the methodology of the WHO fact-finding team, and spread the general awareness.
Oh, absolutely. Professor Rahilkar, the study that was on at Wuhan, is there any evidence to suggest that the leak was either natural or engineered, released accidentally or intentionally?
I don't think there is any evidence right now that it was an intentional release, but the Chinese labs had the capability to modify or make chimeric viruses or insert spikes into different backbones. And they had a very good backbone, this RATG13, which was collected from the mine shaft. So they had the techniques to make a chimeric virus. And I think that's the reason why we should look into the lab leak hypothesis.
Okay, Professor Chilani, Mike Pompeo's recent comments that it's not an accidental leak but far more dangerous. Now, when he speaks of bioweapons, or when he speaks of bioterror, is there a suggestion that the coronavirus may not have been an accidental leak after all from the Wuhan lab?
Well, let's be clear that no group of scientists has claimed that the COVID-19 virus was intentionally created as a bioweapon. However, a growing body of scientific opinion has come to believe that the virus's origin in a Wuhan lab through accidental escape or accidental infection of employees or lab animals is possible. Let's look at it, let's turn this question on its head. If the virus did not originate in a lab, and if China was not guilty of any cover-up, wouldn't China be facilitating a transparent and independent inquiry by outside experts in order to clear the air with the rest of the world? China, however, has done exactly the opposite. It has even refused to turn over the raw health data from its first COVID-19 cases to the WHO. And instead of giving outside investigators access to lab reports, data, and personnel, Beijing has kept the Wuhan lab samples, records, and research dossiers under lock and key.
Yes.
If the Chinese government did nothing wrong, why would it refuse to share raw data and grant complete transparent access to the research facilities of the Wuhan Institute of Virology? And let's not forget that lab leaks have happened in the past. One example is the Soviet era anthrax leak in the Soviet Union. It was admitted by Moscow only after the Soviet Union collapsed. And if you look at lab leaks within China, they've happened. In 2004, there was a SARS outbreak in Beijing. That SARS outbreak in Beijing happened because of accidental infections in a lab. So there is a history of lab leaks, and China's safety record is such that Pompeo has been warning ever since he was in office that such leaks are going to happen in the future too. That's the reason why we need a thorough and complete investigation of how the COVID-19 pandemic arose.
And which clearly hasn't happened so far. Will it happen remains the big question. Ambassador Sajanhar, so when Mike Pompeo talks of a bioweapon, when he talks of bioterror, is this fear-mongering? Because even the Australian last week had a report that spoke of Chinese officials talking about a World War III scenario and the use of bioweapons, sir. So is all of this too far-fetched?
You know, some people might be inclined to see what Mike Pompeo says as, more politics, that, he has his eyes on the 2024 elections and sort of, he's priming himself for that. But I think whatever might be all these statements, and you said about this, that 2015 onwards, they've been working on it. They have been investing heavily into it. So I think all these things really need to be gone into, investigated, and the matters set to rest one way or the other. Because I think these doubts, whether it was manufactured in a lab, whether it was set out in the open intentionally, did it go out into the open and resulted in all these infections unintentionally. I think all these need to be gone into basically for two reasons. One is to deal with the pandemic as it exists today, because we are seeing that the virus is mutating. There are different strains that are coming. And if we know how was it created, then we'll be able to deal with all these strains, I think, in a much better way. Scientists are on your panel, and I'm sure they will be able to comment on it even better. But basically, if you know the structure, if you know where it has come from, how it has evolved, you'll be able to do it.
And
equally, if not more importantly, the next
outbreak,
pandemic that comes, we'll be able to check that also.
Outbreak, you'll be able to check.
That comes, we'll be able to check that also.
Oh, absolutely. Saikiran, research was on to assess the ability of the virus to impact and infect the human cells. Through open source intelligence and through the scientists, is there any forward movement on why such a research was happening? What is it that they were hoping to achieve with this research?
Yes, there's a lot of justification from the side of WIV as well as the scientists that have been working for well over a decade now. So the chief justification is that, it's ironical, but the justification is that they want to prevent future outbreaks. So you may laugh at it, and you may wonder what kind of what is the end result of this all? But yes, eventually, that is what they wanted to. They wanted to study more on how these viruses will infect human beings, and that's why they kind of implant human cells onto mice, and then implant the virus on the mouse, and see how it impacts the human cells, thereby understanding how this would probably affect human beings in the future. So yeah, I think that's what I think Monalika would also love to add on to what I've said.
And the last comment goes to you, Dr. Rahilkar. With this research, is there anything to suggest, as some argue, that there was perhaps they were looking at bioweapons in the future. The Australian media seems to indicate that some political leaders in Australia are saying that this requires closer investigation.
Yes, a few days ago, Miss Shari Maxon from Australian News, she disclosed this. There was a book about China making bioweapons, but still there is no clear report. But I think the way they were going on indicates that they were into making some chimeric viruses. But I didn't find any clear evidence that this was a intended bioweapon. That's my personal.
Well, perhaps with a detailed investigation, if ever there is one, facts will emerge. Some bits emerging, a lot more required. But to all my guests, many thanks for joining me, Ambassador Sajjanhar, Professor Chelani, Sai Kiran, and Professor Rahilkar. A quick break. On the other side,